know, I'm simply a businessman who lives up the street, up the Green Line in Brookline. See, I make sandwiches for a living. I began with one bakery about a block away at Park Street Station 30 years ago. And today I run a public company with 1,700 locations in 44 states in Canada. So I'm not controversial. Let me share with you something I learned after 30 years in business. You don't stay CEO long if you can't solve problems. Indeed, if you don't solve problems, what happens? You get fired. Every day I have to ask myself in business, how can we stay one step ahead of the competition? How do we make ourselves the best place to work with the employees who are engaged and loyal to our brand? And how do we become a powerful force for good in the lives of our customers? These are concrete questions, and they have concrete answers. And if we get them wrong, we fail. And if we fail, there are implications. Because if we fail, there are a lot of people who are counting on us, and we let them down. So when I make a decision as a business person, you make decisions as a business person, I think about the implications. I think about the 8 million customers that we could count on Panera to get it right. I think about the over $5 billion in investor capital that rides on the quality of our decision making. And I think most importantly about the 75,000 employees whose livelihoods depend on our continued success. I saw one of our ex-employees here today. See, as a business person, I don't survive long if we don't resolve problems. The ability to resolve problems is at the core of leadership. So I often wonder, why is leadership so rare in American politics today? Do you wonder it? Yes. Why do our political leaders have so little urgency to solve our problems? Do you wonder it? I do. And why is failure and gridlock expected and even rewarded in Washington, D.C.? Do you wonder it? Absolutely. Many of our government's problems have become election-proof. During every campaign, we hear the same promises. We hear promises to reform our tax code, to balance our budget, and to develop a national energy policy. But after every election, these promises are crushed under the weight of the same poisonous rhetoric and partisan bravado. Democratic and Republican leaders come and go, but a dysfunctional system remains. Washington looks to this businessman like a married couple that spends all of its time fighting and trying to prove each other wrong. Sometimes even, our government reminds me of the movie The War of the Roses. Do you remember that movie? With we the citizens cast as the unfortunate kids left holding the bag. We can't accept this anymore. Washington's dysfunction is making America dysfunctional. And Washington's dysfunction is sapping the confidence of investors and consumers alike. Indeed, if we allow this dysfunction to continue, our children will inherit a country significantly weaker than it is today. That's why I co-founded No Labels. A few years ago, I heard about this grassroots movement called No Labels. I went to a dinner, listened, and got involved. I imagine it's very similar to how many of you got involved in the Tea Party movement. To me, No Labels' approach offered the only realistic way out of this mess. See, No Labels is about promoting a new politics of problem solving. Well, what does that mean? What does problem solving mean? It's about an attitude more than anything else. You know it. It means a willingness to sit down with anyone, conservative, liberal, or anyone in between, so long as they're willing to work with you to find solutions. It is not about squishy centrism. It's not about mushy moderation. It's about hard-headed pragmatism. That's what we need. Democrats control the White House and the Senate. The Republicans control the House. We have divided government now, and we have divided government for the foreseeable future. Divided government means that we have only two options before us. Option one is the status quo. Both parties can keep fighting and refuse to settle for anything less than total victory for their side. But neither party, neither point of view has enough political power for total victory, and they won't anytime soon. So that means that you, that means me, and all Americans are stuck with no progress. we'll be stuck with another $1 trillion tacked on our government's $16 trillion debt every year. We'll be stuck with no fixes to a tax code that no one can make sense of. We'll be stuck with no real solutions on immigration, on energy, on streamlining our government. And without the wherewithal to compete internationally with nation states like China, India, and Brazil. You get the point. Option 2, the one I propose, is the other alternative. It's the no labels way. It calls for a new politics that says the only solution that is unacceptable, the only solution that's unacceptable is no solution. Indeed, our approach argues kicking the can down the road or pushing the problem to the next Congress, or worse, the next generation, is simply unacceptable. Indeed, in the view of this businessman, me, such an approach is the only approach that has the potential to unburden the next generation. When I first became involved in No Labels, I found myself thinking, is this just another one of those Don Quixote efforts that so many of us seem to get involved in? Can we actually make a difference when the system is bigger than any one of us? My answer now is yes. Why? Because so many people in this country understand the depths of the problem. I travel this country, I speak to people in Birmingham, Alabama, Dearborn, Michigan, and San Francisco, California. They all say the same thing. The only constituency that isn't represented in Washington, the only special interest that isn't represented in Washington is the common good. And that's our responsibility. No Labels has a focused strategy to bring us together with pragmatism. First, we're organizing citizens across America because Washington politicians don't change unless they get pressure from the grassroots. You taught us that. You and the Tea Party know it better than anybody else. No Labels today is almost 600,000 Democrats, Republicans, and independents across this country dedicated to moving America away from the old politics of point scoring and towards the new politics of problem solving. Second, we're pushing for common sense, structural reforms to make our government work better. I'm going to share with you one of them. It's something called No Budget, No Pay, and I know you'll support that. It simply calls for no congressional pay if there's failure to pass a budget on time. And here's the good news. We're getting it done. It was passed into law in February. Let me tell you something. Based on that law and based on what the momentum we're building, the Senate and the House just released budgets for the first time in 4 years. Can you imagine a $3.7 trillion enterprise, our government operating without a budget for 4 years? Folks, ultimately, No Budget, No Pay worked because it brought structural reforms to Washington. Let me talk about the third focus of No Labels. It's bringing leaders together to take on the system and solve the hard problems. We're building a new group on Capitol Hill called the Problem Solvers Group. This Problem Solvers Group today consists of 56 congresspeople, Democrats and Republicans, liberals and Tea Partiers, who are meeting regularly to build trust across the aisle. We aim to grow the group to over 70 members by year end, and frankly, today it's working. They're currently working on shared policy solutions that you'll be hearing a great deal more about this summer. This is an unprecedented development. The reality is the Problem Solvers is the only forum that exists in Washington for rank-and-file Democrats and Republicans to come together and discuss solutions. These groups, these parties don't talk to each other. They talk to their caucuses. They respond to their leadership. It's where the currency of politics in D.C. is. People would be shocked if they knew how little interaction our leaders have with one another. Our leaders are strangers because they've given up on the idea that Democrats and Republicans can actually have anything useful to say to each other. I've been personally recruiting members of Congress to join this group, and I'm constantly amazed by how hungry our congresspeople are for what No Labels is offering. They're at the effect of the system just as we are. Many of these members are just as sick of the mindless partisanship as their constituents. They understand better than anyone else how the dysfunctional system works. The idea we have here is to create a new center of gravity in Congress. The Problem Solvers Group will provide air cover for those in Congress willing to come together to confront our challenges with real solutions. And it will be a vehicle to discuss across party lines these solutions. Let me tell you, as a guy who runs restaurants, I like to explain no labels work in language I'm familiar with. So here's how I talk about it. We're telling Democrats and Republicans, come to the table. You don't have to like everything that's on the table. You don't have to eat everything that's on the table. But all we ask is come to the table and at least let's see what's on the menu and see if we can share a meal together. Folks, you know it better than me. It's the common purpose that today's leaders need to embrace. No Labels does not expect anyone to shed their principles or their political beliefs when they join our movement. We just expect them to embrace the idea that people with different beliefs must set aside the labels and the rhetoric and come together to solve problems. It's an attitude that can be embraced by the Tea Party. Indeed, the Tea Party was born from the frustration of the refusal to have your ideas discussed. And that's what we're asking for. It's an attitude that's clear. It's an attitude that we want. The theme of this event is unburdening the next generation. And that burden simply won't be lifted until we get our leaders focused on listening and fixing instead of self-righteous fighting. Absolutely. As I conclude, let me leave you with this final thought. America simply can't move forward until Democrats and Republicans commit to breaking this gridlock. But it won't happen on its own. We've got thousands of people, tens of thousands of people emailing. We've got hundreds of thousands of people involved in phone chains that are speaking to their legislators and asking them to join together as problem solvers. And we'd love to have your help. I hope you'll visit nolabels.org, which is our website, to learn more about what we're doing and about how our approach can advance priorities that you, the Tea Party, care deeply about. Thank you for having me.